He thought he was protecting the reputation of a luxury hotel, but within minutes, he would discover that he had just humiliated the woman who owned it. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you believe respect should never depend on appearances, make sure to like and subscribe. Stories like this remind us why dignity still matters. Now, back to Claire Whitmore. The glass doors of the Grand Aurora Hotel slid open beneath towering crystal chandeliers worth more than most people earned in a year. Guests moved across polished marble floors, rolling designer luggage behind them while soft piano music drifted through the vast lobby. It was the kind of place where appearances seemed to matter almost as much as money. At the center of it all stood Jason Keller, the hotel's general manager. At 45, Jason carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed he could spot success from 50 feet away. His tailored navy suit fit perfectly. His silver name badge gleamed beneath the warm lights, and his eyes constantly scanned the lobby, silently judging who belonged and who did not. Then the front doors opened again. A woman stepped inside carrying a worn brown suitcase. She wore faded blue jeans, comfortable walking shoes, and a cream-colored sweater. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth, influence, or status. Several guests barely noticed her. Jason noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed. Claire Whitmore paused near the entrance and quietly took in the lobby around her. She studied the front desk, the concierge station, the bell staff, and the waiting area where families sat sipping coffee. Her expression remained calm and unreadable. She seemed less interested in luxury than in observation. Jason watched her from across the room. Something about her presence irritated him. Perhaps it was the fact that she looked completely out of place among the expensive suits and designer handbags surrounding her. Or perhaps it was because he had spent years convincing himself that appearances revealed everything he needed to know about a person. As Claire approached the reception desk, Jason stepped forward before any employee could greet her. The smile on his face looked professional, but it never reached his eyes. "Can I help you with something, ma'am?" he asked. Claire returned a polite smile. "Yes, I'd like to check in." Jason's gaze drifted briefly toward her suitcase, her sweater, and her shoes before returning to her face. A faint smirk appeared. "Do you have a reservation?" Claire nodded calmly. "I do." What Jason didn't know was that Claire Whitmore wasn't an ordinary guest. She wasn't a tourist. She wasn't a traveler looking for a room. And she certainly wasn't someone who needed permission to be there. She had arrived for a reason that would soon expose far more than she ever expected. And before the day was over, every person standing in that lobby would learn a lesson they would never forget. The room still buzzed with conversation, unaware that everything was about to change. Claire reached into her handbag and calmly presented her reservation confirmation. Jason accepted the printed document and glanced at it for less than a second before placing it on the marble counter. "I am afraid there appears to be an issue," he said. His voice remained polite, but there was a sharpness beneath it. Claire tilted her head slightly. "What kind of issue?" Jason tapped a few keys on the computer in front of him. In reality, there was no issue at all. Her reservation was sitting clearly on the screen. The suite had been booked weeks earlier. But Jason had already made up his mind about the woman standing in front of him. Facts no longer mattered. Assumptions did. "Our records are not matching up properly," he said. "Perhaps there was a mistake during the booking process." Claire remained calm. "I have the confirmation number right there." Jason offered a rehearsed smile. "Unfortunately, that does not guarantee availability." Around them, the lobby continued its elegant rhythm. Bellhops rolled polished luggage carts across the floor. Guests chatted beside the grand staircase. Soft piano notes floated through the air. Yet Claire noticed something else. Employees were watching. A young receptionist, standing nearby, looked uncomfortable. A concierge glanced toward Jason and then quickly looked away. They had seen this before. Jason's judgments were not unusual. Claire quietly observed everything. Every expression, every reaction, every decision. What nobody in the lobby knew was that she carried a small black notebook inside her handbag. Over the past 6 months, she had visited 12 properties across the country. She had checked into hotels under different names, worn simple clothing, and traveled without announcing who she was. The purpose was simple. She wanted to understand what ordinary guests experienced when nobody believed they were important. Some locations had impressed her. Others had disappointed her. But so far, nothing compared to what she was seeing today. Jason crossed his arms. Perhaps there are other accommodations available nearby. Claire looked directly at him. You are asking me to leave? The question hung in the air. For a brief moment, even Jason seemed aware of how unreasonable he sounded. Then his pride took control. I am suggesting that another hotel might better fit your needs. Claire nodded slowly. She recognized the language immediately. It was not about reservations. It was not about availability. It was about appearance. Several feet away, a middle-aged couple sitting in the lobby lounge exchanged glances. Even they seemed to sense what was happening. The atmosphere had shifted. Claire could have ended everything right there. One phone call would have solved the situation instantly. One sentence would have changed every expression in the room. But she remained silent. She wanted the truth. Unfiltered. Unedited. She wanted to see how far this would go. Jason interpreted her silence as weakness. That was his biggest mistake. He believed he was dealing with someone powerless. He had no idea that every word leaving his mouth was quietly becoming part of an evaluation that could determine the future of his entire career. And as the tension inside the lobby continued to grow, Jason Keller prepared to take a step he would soon regret more than any decision he had ever made. Jason straightened his tie and glanced around the lobby, suddenly aware that more people were paying attention. What had started as a simple interaction was becoming a public scene. Instead of backing down, he leaned further into the role he had created for himself. The young receptionist standing beside him shifted uneasily. She looked at Claire, then at the reservation on the screen. Sir, she said quietly, the booking appears to be active. Jason shot her a look sharp enough to silence her immediately. I will handle this, he replied. The receptionist lowered her eyes and stepped back. Claire noticed everything. She noticed the hesitation. She noticed the discomfort. Most importantly, she noticed how quickly people abandoned their own judgment when authority entered the conversation. Jason turned back toward her. Ma'am, I am trying to resolve this professionally. Claire nodded. I appreciate that. Her calmness only irritated him more. He had expected frustration. He had expected embarrassment. Instead, she stood there with a level of composure that made him feel strangely unsettled. Across the lobby, a businessman seated near the fireplace had stopped checking his phone. A family waiting near the elevators watched from a distance. Even the concierge seemed unable to focus on his work. A quiet tension had settled over the room. Jason lowered his voice slightly. The Grand Aurora maintains very high standards for its guests. Claire looked at him carefully. And what standards are those? For a moment, Jason hesitated. The answer sounded perfectly reasonable inside his head. Yet saying it aloud suddenly felt dangerous. Still, pride pushed him forward. We cater to a particular clientele. Claire's expression never changed. I see. Jason mistook her response for acceptance. He felt more confident with every passing second. People choose this property because of the environment we provide. Claire glanced around the lobby. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Fresh flowers decorated marble tables. Employees moved quietly between guests. It was beautiful, yet beauty meant very little when respect was missing. Inside her handbag, her fingers brushed against the small black notebook. She did not remove it. Not yet. Instead, she continued observing. Jason took another step forward. Perhaps there is a more suitable hotel a few miles down the road. A hush fell over the nearby reception area. Even the guests watching understood exactly what he meant. Nobody mentioned money. Nobody mentioned appearance. Yet everyone understood the message. You do not belong here. Claire folded her hands gently in front of her. And you are certain that is your recommendation? Jason nodded. Absolutely. The confidence in his voice surprised even him. He felt victorious. He believed he had solved a problem before it affected the image of the hotel. What he did not realize was that he had already failed the most important test of his career. Claire gave a small smile. Not angry. Not sarcastic. Simply thoughtful. The smile confused him. Most people became defensive when challenged. Most people argued. Claire did neither. She simply seemed to be learning something. And she was. She was learning exactly how this hotel treated someone who appeared ordinary. Somewhere deep inside the building, events were already beginning to move in a direction Jason could not see. Phone calls had been made earlier that morning. Executives were traveling. Schedules were changing. Plans were already in motion. But standing beneath the glow of the chandeliers, Jason Keller remained completely unaware. The trap was not being set for him. He had built it himself. And with every word he spoke, he stepped a little deeper inside. Claire finally reached into her handbag and pulled out the small black notebook. She opened it slowly and wrote a few brief lines. The movement caught Jason's attention immediately. "What is that?" he asked. Claire glanced up. "Just notes." "Notes about what?" Jason asked. "About my experience today." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. It disappeared almost instantly. He forced a smile. "I assure you, there is nothing unusual about our service." Claire wrote another sentence before closing the notebook. "That is interesting," she said quietly, "because from where I am standing, it feels very unusual." The words were calm, but they landed with unexpected. "Wait." Several nearby employees exchanged nervous looks. The young receptionist who had tried to speak earlier seemed especially uncomfortable now. She knew the reservation was valid. She knew Claire had done nothing wrong, yet she remained silent. Jason noticed the attention gathering around them and made a decision that would push everything past the point of no return. He stepped behind the reception desk and addressed the staff in a voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Please be advised that this individual will not be checking in today." A hush spread across the lobby. The receptionist's eyes widened. Claire simply watched. Jason continued. "We reserve the right to refuse accommodations when circumstances require managerial discretion." The statement sounded official, professional, reasonable. That was exactly why it was so effective. Most people hearing it would assume there was information they did not know. Claire recognized the tactic immediately. Rather than admitting a mistake, Jason was creating a narrative. He was positioning himself as the protector of standards and her as the problem. What Jason did not realize was that every camera in the lobby was recording. Every interaction, every statement, every expression. Claire had already noted the camera locations when she entered the building. She always did. A lifetime in business had taught her that facts mattered far more than opinions. Facts remained when emotions disappeared. One of the bellmen approached cautiously. "Sir," he said quietly, "is there anything I can help with?" Jason shook his head. "No, everything is under control." The bellman stepped back, though his expression suggested otherwise. Claire noticed him glance apologetically in her direction. Not everyone in the building lacked empathy. That mattered. She remembered faces. She remembered kindness, just as she remembered arrogance. Through the massive front windows, afternoon sunlight spilled across the marble floor. Outside, luxury vehicles came and went beneath the covered entrance. Guests arrived carrying designer luggage. Valets opened doors. The grand aurora continued projecting perfection to the world. Yet beneath that polished surface, something important had already cracked. Culture revealed itself during uncomfortable moments. Not during advertisements. Not during training seminars. During moments exactly like this. Claire looked around one final time. She saw employees avoiding eye contact. She saw guests pretending not to stare. She saw Jason standing confidently behind the desk, convinced he had protected the hotel's image. Then she closed her notebook and placed it back inside her handbag. That simple action brought Jason visible relief. He thought the encounter was ending. He thought he had won. What he could not possibly know was that less than 30 minutes away, 3 black SUVs were already moving toward the hotel. Inside them sat people whose arrival would transform this ordinary afternoon into the most unforgettable day of his professional life. Claire lifted her suitcase and turned toward the entrance without another argument. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand an explanation. She did not reveal who she was. Instead, she walked away with the same quiet dignity she had carried into the hotel. That choice puzzled everyone watching. Most people would have fought back. Most people would have demanded a manager. Most people would have tried to prove they belonged. Claire simply walked. The sound of her shoes echoed softly across the marble floor as dozens of eyes followed her movement. For a brief moment, the entire lobby seemed suspended in silence. Then the automatic doors opened, and she disappeared outside. Jason released a slow breath. The tension he had been carrying seemed to vanish instantly. He adjusted his tie and straightened his posture. In his mind, the situation was resolved. A potential problem had been removed. The hotel's image remained intact, or so he believed. The receptionist stared toward the entrance long after Claire was gone. Something about the encounter continued to bother her. She looked down at the reservation record still displayed on her monitor. Everything was valid. Everything had been approved. There had never been a problem. Jason noticed her expression. "You seem concerned," he said. The young woman hesitated. "Sir, are you sure we handled that correctly?" The question lingered between them. Jason immediately became defensive. "Absolutely." But her reservation was confirmed. His jaw tightened. "You are new here, so let me explain something. Hospitality is not just about reservations. It is about maintaining standards." The receptionist lowered her eyes. She wanted to disagree. She wanted to point out that standards should apply to behavior, not appearances. But she remained silent. Across the lobby, a businessman who had witnessed the entire exchange quietly shook his head before returning to his laptop. Nearby, a couple exchanged uncomfortable glances. The atmosphere felt wrong, yet nobody said anything. That was often how these moments survived. Not because everyone agreed, because too few people spoke. Meanwhile, outside beneath the covered entrance, Claire placed her suitcase beside a stone planter filled with white flowers. She sat calmly on a bench facing the driveway. The afternoon sun reflected off the hotel's massive glass facade. To anyone passing by, she appeared completely unbothered. But her mind was working. She replayed every detail, every expression, every decision, every employee who showed kindness, every employee who chose silence. Her notebook returned to her hands. She opened it again and wrote several more observations. Then she closed it and checked the time. Right on schedule. A faint smile appeared. Across town, the first black SUV turned onto the boulevard leading toward the Grand Aurora. A second followed behind it. Then a third. Inside those vehicles sat senior executives from Whitmore Hospitality Group. Their visit had been planned for weeks. What had not been planned was the lesson waiting for them when they arrived. Back inside the hotel, Jason stood proudly behind the reception desk, completely unaware of what was approaching. He believed the story was over. In reality, it had only just begun. And within the next few minutes, the confidence filling the lobby would be replaced by something very different. The truth. Back inside the Grand Aurora, the atmosphere had returned to what appeared to be normal. Guests checked in. Luggage carts rolled across the marble floors. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers. Yet beneath the polished surface, something was changing. Jason Keller stood at the reception desk, feeling more confident than he had all day. The difficult situation was behind him. At least that was what he believed. Then one of the valets near the entrance suddenly straightened. Through the massive glass windows, 3 black SUVs slowly turned beneath the covered driveway. Their glossy exteriors reflected the afternoon sunlight as they came to a smooth stop in front of the hotel. The movement immediately caught attention throughout the lobby. Employees glanced toward the entrance. Guests looked up from their conversations. Jason adjusted his suit jacket. A smile appeared on his face. He recognized the vehicles. Important visitors. Potential investors. Perhaps even executives from corporate headquarters. Exactly the kind of people he enjoyed impressing. The front doors opened. Several sharply dressed men and women stepped inside. Their presence instantly changed the energy of the room. They carried themselves with quiet authority, the kind that did not need to be announced. Jason immediately left the reception desk and walked toward them with practiced confidence. "Welcome to the Grand Aurora," he said warmly. "I am Jason Keller, General Manager. It is an honor to have you here." One of the executives nodded politely but seemed distracted. Another glanced around the lobby as if searching for someone. Jason continued smiling. "We have prepared everything for your arrival. If there is anything you need, my team is ready to assist." The senior executive, a distinguished man named Robert Hayes, looked directly at him. "Thank you," he said. "But before we discuss anything else, we need to find Ms. Claire Whitmore." Jason's smile remained frozen. For a second, he assumed he had misheard. "I am sorry," he replied. "Who?" "Claire Whitmore," Robert repeated. "She should already be here." The room seemed to grow quieter. Jason felt a small knot form in his stomach. The name sounded familiar, though he could not immediately place it. Around him, several employees exchanged nervous looks. Robert checked his watch. "She arrived ahead of us this afternoon." Another executive stepped forward. "Have any of you seen her?" The receptionist's face suddenly lost color. Jason noticed the change immediately. His eyes narrowed. The young woman looked toward the entrance, then back toward the executives. For the first time all day, genuine uncertainty appeared inside Jason's mind. "May I ask why you are looking for her?" he said carefully. Robert stared at him for a moment. The answer came calmly. Because she requested this inspection personally. Inspection. The word landed heavily. Jason felt his pulse quicken. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Outside, seated quietly on the bench near the entrance, Claire Whitmore closed her notebook and stood. Through the glass doors, she could already see the executives inside searching for her. The moment had arrived. And within the next few minutes, every assumption that had guided Jason Keller's decisions that afternoon was about to collapse beneath the weight of a truth he never saw coming. The front doors opened once again, and the quiet murmur filling the lobby faded almost instantly. Claire Whitmore stepped inside carrying the same worn suitcase and wearing the same simple clothes that had caused so many people to dismiss her only minutes earlier. Nothing about her appearance had changed, yet everything else had. Robert Hayes saw her first. His face immediately brightened. "Ms. Whitmore," he said as he walked forward. The executives behind him followed without hesitation. Then something happened that Jason Keller would remember for the rest of his life. Every executive stopped and greeted Claire with visible respect. Several shook her hand. Others welcomed her warmly. One even thanked her for making the trip personally. The room went silent. Jason froze where he stood. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The woman he had refused to accommodate. The woman he had suggested leave. The woman he had publicly dismissed. The entire executive team was treating her as the most important person in the building. Claire smiled politely at each of them before turning her attention toward the lobby. Her eyes eventually settled on Jason. For the first time that afternoon, he felt genuinely uncomfortable. Robert noticed the expression on Jason's face. "You have met Ms. Whitmore already, I assume?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. The silence became almost painful. The receptionist looked down. The concierge stared at the floor. Even several guests sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. Jason cleared his throat. "I believe there may have been a misunderstanding." Claire said nothing. That silence was somehow worse than anger. Robert looked between them. "A misunderstanding?" Jason forced a nervous smile. "We had some confusion regarding a reservation." Robert frowned. "A reservation?" Another executive looked surprised. "Ms. Whitmore owns the reservation system." A few people gasped softly. Jason's face lost color. The words struck him like a freight train. "Owns the reservation system." Suddenly, every missing piece fell into place. Claire Whitmore was not simply connected to the company. She was not an inspector. She was not a consultant. She was the founder and majority owner of Whitmore Hospitality Group, the corporation that operated luxury hotels across the country. The company whose name appeared on every paycheck he had received for the last 7 years. A hush fell across the lobby. Even the guests watching from a distance seemed unable to look away. Jason felt his confidence evaporate. Minutes earlier, he had been giving instructions. Now he could barely find words. "Ms. Whitmore," he began. "If I had known." Claire gently raised a hand. He stopped speaking immediately. "That is exactly the point," she said calmly. Her voice remained soft, but every person in the room heard it clearly. "You should not have needed to know." The room went completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because everyone understood what she meant. Respect should never depend on a title. Dignity should never depend on wealth. And standing beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Aurora, Jason Keller finally realized that the person he had judged most harshly was the one person whose opinion mattered most. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound in the vast lobby came from the distant piano music drifting through the speakers. Jason Keller stood motionless, struggling to recover from a reality that had completely shattered the story he had been telling himself all afternoon. Claire Whitmore did not appear angry. That somehow made the situation even worse. Anger could be defended against. Anger eventually faded, but disappointment lingered. Robert Hayes glanced toward the executive team and then back to Claire. "Would you like us to move this discussion to the conference room?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "No." Her answer was simple. "I think we should review what happened exactly as it happened." Several executives exchanged knowing looks. They understood immediately. Facts first, assumptions later. That had always been one of Claire's principles. She turned toward the reception desk. "I would like access to the lobby security footage." The request landed heavily. Jason felt his stomach tighten. He suddenly remembered every word he had spoken, every decision he had justified, every moment he had assumed nobody important was watching. Now he realized someone had been watching all along. Cameras. Robert nodded to one of the operations directors. Within minutes, a laptop was connected to one of the large display screens normally used for corporate presentations. Employees gathered quietly nearby. Guests pretended not to watch while clearly watching every second. The room went silent again. The footage began. There was Claire entering through the front doors carrying her suitcase. There was the reservation confirmation. There was the receptionist verifying the booking. There was Jason stepping forward. Nobody needed commentary. The video spoke for itself. Every expression, every interruption, every assumption. As the footage continued, the atmosphere grew heavier. Employees who had remained silent earlier now looked increasingly uncomfortable. Several executives frowned. One shook his head slowly. The receptionist stared at the floor. She remembered the moment she could have spoken more forcefully. The moment she chose safety over courage. Then came the part everyone remembered. Jason suggesting that another hotel might be more appropriate. Jason publicly announcing that Claire would not be checking in. Jason using the language of professionalism to disguise personal judgment. Nobody said a word. They did not need to. The evidence was undeniable. When the recording finally ended, the screen went dark. The silence that followed seemed louder than anything that had come before it. Claire looked around the lobby. Not at Jason first. At everyone. What concerns me most, she said calmly, is not that one person made a poor decision. Her gaze moved across the room. What concerns me is how many people knew it was wrong and said nothing. Several employees lowered their eyes. The words hit harder than any accusation. Because they were true. Culture was not created by policies framed on walls. Culture was revealed by what people tolerated. Robert folded his hands in front of him. The executives remained silent, allowing Claire to continue. She looked toward Jason at last. His confidence was gone now. In its place stood a man finally seeing the consequences of judging someone by appearance rather than character. And for the first time all afternoon, he understood that the real inspection had never been about the hotel. It had been about the people inside it. The lobby remained silent as Claire Whitmore allowed the weight of the moment to settle over everyone present. No one rushed to speak. No one attempted another explanation. The truth had already done its work. Jason Keller stood near the reception desk, staring at the dark screen where the footage had just finished playing. For the first time in years, he had no defense left to offer. Claire looked at him calmly. When I started this company, she said, I did not build hotels for wealthy people. I built them for travelers. Every guest who walks through those doors deserves the same respect, whether they arrive in a limousine or a 10-year-old sedan. Her voice was gentle, yet every word seemed to echo through the marble lobby. Luxury is not crystal chandeliers. Luxury is how people are treated. A hush fell over the room. Robert Hayes nodded slowly. Several executives exchanged thoughtful glances. They had heard Claire speak about company values many times before, but seeing those principles tested in real life carried far greater power than any meeting or presentation. Claire turned toward the receptionist. You noticed something was wrong. The young woman looked up nervously. Yes, ma'am. Claire offered a small smile. Next time, trust your instincts. Character matters more than hierarchy. The receptionist's eyes filled with relief. It was not praise she would forget. Then Claire looked back at Jason. The room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone expected anger. Some expected humiliation. Others expected immediate dismissal. Instead, Claire remained composed. Leadership is a responsibility, she said. The moment we start judging people by appearance, we stop serving them. Jason lowered his head. There was nothing he could say. The lesson had already been delivered. Robert stepped forward. Effective immediately, there will be a complete review of management practices at this property. His tone was professional but firm. Several executives began taking notes. Claire nodded once. The decision was not driven by revenge. It was driven by accountability. There was a difference. Outside, the afternoon sun continued shining through the glass walls. Guests resumed their conversations. Employees slowly returned to their duties. Yet something had changed inside the Grand Aurora. The atmosphere felt lighter somehow, as if an invisible tension had finally been removed. Claire picked up her suitcase. This time, no one questioned where she belonged. The same employees who had watched her walk out earlier now stepped forward with genuine respect. A bellman offered assistance. A concierge welcomed her warmly, not because she owned the hotel, because they finally understood the lesson she had come to teach. As Claire walked toward the elevators, She glanced once more across the lobby. The people standing there would remember this day for years. Not because of a scandal, not because of a punishment, but because they had witnessed something far more important. They had witnessed the difference between status and dignity. And that day, beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers and a cross, floors of polished marble, everyone learned a truth that no luxury brand could ever replace. Respect should never be reserved for the people we believe are important. True character is revealed by how we treat the people we think are not.